Let's see who else turns up. Hope you've had a good week and a nice weather like we've had in England. Well, not always, but most of the time. So far, this has been a nice spring and summer. Here comes Eduardo. Yeah, I see Martin is up and connected.
Just something, wait. I'll be back.
See, Sandra is also arriving. Welcome, Sandra. Hello, Daniel. Hello, Sam. Oh, so we have emoticons as well now. Hello, Daniel. Hey, it's summer, isn't it?
It's gone. Had my shirt off, so I was going to put the shirt on, but you ain't going to get the shirt on. There we go. I'm ready.
Yeah, a bright spot on the screen. Thank you. Let's see if someone else is joining us at the very last minute. Oh, Eduardo.
Hello. Good morning.
Good to see you. What's the time in Monterrey?
Good. 7 a.m.
7 a.m. Wow.
7 a.m. Yes.
Oh, Eva has a beautiful cat there assisting as well. Oh, let's see, somebody else is knocking at the door. I have prepared a bit of a reading list. Well, at first that was upon a request from Alan, but I think I'm going to share that with everybody. They are books about the fourth way and other things as well, which I believe may be a good starting point. It's not just one book, it's 4 of them actually. And that's because there may be different ways you want to approach the topic. So you may choose a more, say, mystical approach, a more mental or, let's say, theoretical approach, or something which looks like psychology. So I'll send that to everybody after this webinar. Let me try the speaker view, see how that works. When I do the speaker view, I see Eduardo there. Eduardo, is your microphone on now?
Oh, yes, sorry. I'm going to mute.
Okay, so if you turn that off, let me see if the speaker view works better now. Hello, hello. No, looks like I have to pin my screen. So let me see where that is. Yeah, there we go. Okay, well, looks like we are all on board for today. So let me finish what I had started to say. So that reading list will be just a suggestion. Most of these books are still in print or they are available online, some of them for free. And they are a great starter for self-reading or for a conversation that we may have later. Okay. This is lecture number 6 that I've titled Obstacles Along the Way, Shadows and Ghosts. So, quite a scary topic. But as usual, let's begin with a bit of a recap of what we've found so far. Something that in movies and comics is called the story so far. In a nutshell, so we've seen that we're not really sure what we are. The more we inquire about this, about our own nature, and the more we have to admit we are a mystery to ourselves. So we feel that it's definitely important to make an effort and get to know ourselves. By the way, we are not at all clear why we are here on Earth, wearing these bodies on top of our souls and subject to many unfair and sometimes tragic conditions. That is one more mystery. We are starting to see another startling reality, that is, we are hardly ever present to ourselves. So we are hardly ever able to make real choices. But this is a knowledge for selected few. Most of us, and I speak in general terms, do not ever come in contact with this, let's say, uncomfortable reality. But you have, so you know about this. We see that our mind constantly goes out of control, following associations, reacting mechanically, and leading us down paths which we would not choose if we really had a choice. So our life, we are starting to see, is the sum of thousands of these mechanical reactions. It's a bit like the random path you see under the microscope when you see a particle doing a strange path and you can't really tell if there is an intention there. Well, that's more or less the situation. So we are starting to see also that the main problem isn't what happens in the so-called outside world, but rather is the way we react to that. So it may be true that whatever is happening outside is a world which is very badly managed, or let's say even worse, there is a sinister agenda behind a lot of things which happen. So it's like living in a strange dystopian novel where we are under siege by obscure forces. But the real problem which makes this have an impact upon us is the internal condition. It's only our internal condition which makes it possible for what is outside to really have an effect on us. I might easily quote a counterexample. If you think of a Zen monk or a statue of the Buddha, clearly they are not very much affected by what happens outside, although at any moment they can jump and live in the world, but they don't have to. It's a choice. So going back to the topic, we need to turn our gaze within and see what is this sort of Trojan horse that is inside, which makes it possible for the forces besieging us to win a battle after battle over us and make us do things which otherwise we would not choose to do. And as a final icing on the cake, in this war against our inner enemy, we are outnumbered and we are mostly asleep. Now, isn't that a great situation? Well, it might seem like a hopeless fight because of these conditions and the pressure which is constantly upon us. But have you ever seen a proper hero that decides to embark on a supremely difficult quest without serious reasons, without a realm under siege by horrible forces, without an epidemic, without enemies overrunning the friendly forces, or without a very serious loss in his entourage or family. If we consider that an easy life is desirable, let's not forget that one of the side effects of an easy life of pleasures and riches, one of the effects is we don't feel pushed to make any changes. So let's see the good side of all the problems which we may have experienced or we are experiencing now, in that they force us to know more, to improve ourselves, to come out of the hard shell in which we have spent so much time, like trapped. This earth has been described in various ways. Now I've found an interesting description in one of the books quoted by Tom Minderley in his site montag.net, where it was meant that this place was to be a sort of gym for souls to develop and get knowledge and awareness, and somehow enrich the source from which we are coming as innocent sparks, going back like wise sparks, so to speak. Then something went wrong. So this place that was meant to be a gym has become more like a prison. So where do we start to climb back from this almost impossible situation? I would say that a good starting point is to savor that a part of us is immortal. And for this, there is a very simple exercise that I suggest we might do now, those of you who would like. How do we shake off the fear of death? Well, I think most of us have, at some point or another in our life, we have been contemplating the day we might actually leave this body. And that will carry some associations which come from religion, neighbors, friends, parents, television, and everything. And then there is another point of view, that is the one of your own essence. Now, let's compare the two and run this little test. So again, for those who would like, let's do this. So first, we will just contemplate the idea of our death one day. Well, we might believe we are immortal, and so far we are, but probably one day we might discover otherwise. So we will think about that and observe what happens inside. And then we will do it in a slightly different way. So let's begin. Let's relax and concentrate and think about our death. We may include a funeral, we may include people remembering us, everything which is associated to our death. Let it come, have a look. Feelings and thoughts. If it becomes too unpleasant, of course, just stop it. Otherwise, look at your feelings in your chest, look at your thoughts. Okay, I think we've had a good picture now. Now, please come back and let's do the second part of this. Second part is we start by remembering ourselves. So let's bring ourselves to a higher state of consciousness. If you remember, that's not hard. First of all, observe your feelings or your thoughts, and then grab the observer. Cling yourself to the observer who is doing the looking. Feel the observer, which is what you really are. You will now feel more present and you will feel what you really are, that is the witness or the observer. While maintaining this state of presence, now again, consider what happens the day you die. Don't lose your presence. Just be there and bring this thought into your inner stage. Be present. Let your light shine throughout. Remember, your light comes from the inside. Some may feel it comes from the center of your head. Some may feel it comes from the third eye. Anyway, that's your essence shining. Okay, let's wrap it up. You will have noticed that when you are, and I say are with a capital A, so when you exist as an essence shining, the idea of death doesn't make a lot of impression, doesn't change your feelings or your thoughts much. And that's obvious because your essence was not born and will not die. So there is a part of us which is perfectly at ease with the idea that one day we might change our suit or body, so to speak, and go into a different stage. And that's not scary at all. It's just part of the experience. Only if we lower our state of consciousness to those parts which are born and then destroyed on the planet, which are mortal, therefore we will take their point of view, which is, of course, to be afraid of what's going to happen. So our ego, our personality, serves a purpose of interface between our inner core and a three-dimensional planetary environment. That is a consequence of our past experience and of our inner nature, and somehow is shaped based on those two elements. But the way, just as it was created, or let's say formed around us, it will dissipate. So I thought it would be useful to savor this, and you are able to redo this exercise whenever you want, because one of the biggest obstacles along the path is that we are afraid of certain things. And probably the main fear we have, of course, is that of dying and finding ourselves non-existent, obliterated. This is a good point if somebody feels like sharing something that you have experienced during the exercise. You're welcome to either write or just raise your hand, say something if you would like. I see a chat from Anne. You're welcome, you're welcome. You will see that as you get this new concept that you can be at a different state of consciousness, a lot of things change in your life. Your perspective embraces new possibilities in almost everything that you do. The lack of this perspective, on the other hand, will close your view like having blinders and make your possibilities a lot narrower. So taking away these blinders by the concept that we can be more than what we ordinarily are by changing the state of consciousness will make a lot of difference. Okay, can't see many hands because most of the cameras are off, so I will assume we're okay to move on. You're welcome, Alan. It's nice to see you as a child. I like that. So far, this was, let's say, the baseline. That's where we are, and we are discovering that little by practicing and observing. So let's see where the obstacles come from if we have really felt this urge to discover more. We agree that we have probably been misled and deceived for a long time in our lives. So we want to set off and start a quest for knowledge. First of all, self-knowledge. But you will quickly realize that self-knowledge is not really detached from knowledge of the universe or the gods. The two things are so connected. But I like to invite you to start from within because it's a more familiar environment where you can discover things more easily. They are close at hand if only you learn how to do that. So where do problems or obstacles come from? Wow, I could speak for hours. Okay, but I've tried to condense that and make it into a more, let's say, limited amount of stuff. Let's start from the social and familiar environment. If our institutions were aware of this situation and they were willing to help and they introduced these topics at school and they talked about these through newspapers, we could get such a great boost. But for some reason, they don't seem to do that. Now, we could be, let's say, we give them the benefit of doubt and say that maybe they don't know. Or perhaps there is a more sinister plot there. But let's say that we don't get a lot of help from society in general and the institutions. What about family? Well, our parents have been programmed and subject to the same type of pressure and conditioning that we have undergone personally. So we can't expect them to teach about things that they don't know in the first place. And please consider that we should be very understanding of the limitations that our parents have had when growing us as children. It's important to honor their efforts to grow us and acknowledge the difficulties that they've gone through. One of the main obstacles in our psychological development is an unresolved connection with our parents. So we're not here to do a psychological treatise on this, but please consider that this is certainly an important territory for you to consider and to look into if you feel that there is some unresolved issue. What about institutions that are meant to exactly address our inner development? Yes, religions. Well, mainstream religions, I am sure most of us have experienced that. They are not exactly meant to awaken. Let's put it mildly. they don't seem to have a clue about awakening. If you talk, for example, about astral projection to your local priest or imam or whoever, in the best case, he will go, huh, what's that? In the worst case, he will say, oh, that's the devil's works, so stay away from that. And if we believe sincerely that they speak on behalf of God, then we are in a sort of a blind alley and a cognitive dissonance, because we know that we've had a projection, for example, and we're told that we shouldn't, and it's a sin or something. So it is natural that we may turn elsewhere for answers. And if you look a bit more deeply, you will look that we have been implanted with ideas of duality, which make it very difficult to come out safely from, for example, conditioning of a religion. Let me spell that out more clearly. In Italy, in the 70s, when I was a teenager, if you were not a Catholic believer, automatically you were an atheist. There was no middle way. You are either with the mainstream local religion, or you are a godless atheist, and you, by the way, you'll go to hell. We are not taught that there are many other ways to be spiritual, which are neither atheism nor mainstream local traditional religion. But that thought, that sinister dual type thought, is one of the many traps which are inside our mind, and which make us swing like in a pendulum from one extreme all the way to the other, without a possibility to stop in the middle and say, well, maybe there is a way to approach spirituality where I don't have to worship any images or listen to any priests, which I do not personally consider very enlightened, but I may find answers in other ways. And I will not be struck by a lightning from an angry God because I seek my own way. But in order to get to this sort of understanding, we need to escape from some ideas like that of duality, which are normally implanted without us realizing. So it's important to observe, even in our way of thinking, not just the concepts, but the infrastructure of our mind, that sometimes when a concept is rejected, we're automatically presented with the opposite by our own mechanisms. This is one more trap. But now you've heard about this, and you may have a higher chance of realizing that these may prevent us from seeing the great portfolio or spectrum of possibilities which lie between the extremes. There is a whole school called non-duality, which tries to address this sort of wrong thinking. So if it has deserved a complete school of thought from the East, it must be something important. I'm just kidding. That's not enough reason. But let's say that it's an interesting coincidence. By the way, the attribution of importance to something because it's being said by her or him is another trap. We should look at the message, not the messenger, in order to decide how good the content is, how good the message is. But again, we are taught to be very obedient and to be very respectful of the authorities. I remember my grandmother, long time ago, when I asked her about something, Grandma, why do you think that? And she said, oh, the television said it. In her innocence, that was her belief. The television said it. Not even the person, it's the box, you know. And of course, this was just a consequence of the way they were, let's say, programmed and instructed. There is a famous saying in Latin, which is ipse dixit. That means he himself said it, referring to ancient philosophers. Like, how dare you question this? It was said by Aristotle or whoever. Well, I have the full right to question things, no matter who said that. And you all have. One of the fears we have is to be ridiculed. Like, oh, how can you contradict Albert Einstein or Moses or whoever? Don't worry, I'll face him in the other world if necessary. But if I have good reasons to contradict, I will do that. Okay, this is one more right that you should consider for yourselves. There is an interesting movie that comes from the 80s, I believe, that was called They Live. It was by John Carpenter. They lived in a dystopian society which had been taken over by some horrible type of creatures. And you could only see the truth and the reality by putting on certain type of glasses. So instead of the advertising for an ice cream, you would see a message that was obey or sleep, you know, these type of things. So sometimes you can find something good in these movies. And that was particularly relevant because one of the biggest scenes in the movie was this guy, the main character, was trying to have a friend put on the glasses. He said, see for yourself. And the friend wouldn't put them on. So they put up a terrible fight in order to get those glasses on. That was really preposterous. And I think the movie was almost a comedy at that point. But it's a way to suggest that you cannot force people to see the truth. If you try when they are not ready, they will fight in order not to see the truth. There is an interesting question that our friend Sandra asked last week. And I think it's relevant to mention it at this point. And it was about how can I, if I know that there is a terrible truth about something, for example, chemtrails or 9/11, how can I not tell people about this when it's so important and I am sure it's true? And in fact, it's difficult to say, oh, no, just keep it for yourself. So what I would like to underline in this situation is the real important thing is not so much whether the content is good or not. What matters is what is the attitude with which you are communicating. Are you doing that because you can't help it, like it comes out by itself and you like to say that, or there is a good situation and there is a good reason to say that? Because we may use very good ideas at the service of our ego as well. And the only person who can tell the difference is yourself. So, on the other hand, what I was saying was about, is it good or is it bad to say something when we consider it is true? False duality, red flag. It's neither good nor bad. That depends on our attitude. So let's say that I make this example because it was well spelled out in a movie. where people went to sort of paradise, and there was a table of the points that they had earned during their life. So for every good action, there was a number of points. For example, there was one for quit smoking, 50 points. Become vegan, 60 points. Become vegan and not tell everybody about that, 5,000 points. Now, why is that? Why do people become so, let's say, extreme and fanatic of telling everybody that they have something, they have done something, they have stopped eating something, or they just live on apples and celery? So we must be honest enough and see ourselves when we talk about our favorite psychological song or our favorite subject. If we pester our friends with the same subject over and over, then this goes beyond communication of truth. We're probably trying to make a point on behalf of some of our egos. And don't feel bad about that. This is just normal. The ego works like that. So it's much more effective if we are able to say something at the right moment, not just because we like to say that. Then we might become famous as the undesired preachers, like, oh, whenever he comes, talks about apples, I can't stand him. This is not to curb your enthusiasm when you talk about something that you feel is true. That's beautiful, of course. I'm just saying that your energy and your enthusiasm is best placed on a solid foundation of presence, instead of the flimsy foundation of, oh, I really like to say that, and then after 5 minutes, I don't exactly know why I said that at all. It just came out. You know, this sort of feeling. We all have tried that, and it's not a terrible shame. It's just that we need to become aware of this. Okay, so let me pin this video again. Okay, here we go. So the only message that I saw that I think really wants telling is something from Carl. He said, they mess with us. They do all the time in many ways. May I say that? Well, if we try to be objective, let's say that the evidence really points in that direction. Okay, so if we want to be kind of scientific, we might say that the theories and the doctrines of many religions or ideologies, they just will not stand an open criticism and an open debate. They can only survive because when you ask an uncomfortable question, they say, oh, it's the scriptures, or ipse dixit. So there's no way you can have a conversation with the God of the Old Testament. And maybe that's a luck. But anyway, he's not there to answer your questions. And those who say that they are very dogmatic. So if it's written there, it's okay for them. No matter if it talks about slaughtering or sacrifices of animals, or destroying one people to favor another, it doesn't really matter for them. This is just a very thin allusion to the God of the Old Testament. There is a very interesting book that was mentioned by Tom on his site, and this comes from an author called John Baines, and the title is The Stellar Man, where it is explained how the mission that brought Jesus onto our planet was to undo some horrendous mistake made by an Egyptian magician called Moses, who basically brought on earth a sort of hyperdimensional monster, also known as Yahweh, which set up what we now call the Matrix. There are many reasons why that description makes sense. And if you are unbiased and you are available to considering, let's say, alternative points of view, you will see that the original official narrative doesn't stand a chance. We also observed this when talking with a guru of a cult a few years ago. And we noticed that if you start questioning openly, there will be just a shield in front of you and the conversation is over. And they will try to use their authority. They will try to scare you into submission, because if you cast light onto their doctrines, they melt like snow under the sun. There is no substance. The only way they can stand up is by refusing confrontation. So if you are not allowed to speak, they can say whatever they want, then the doctrine stands up. If you raise your hand and start asking questions, you will crumble. So they need to hide. They need to create a fortress which prevents open debate and conversation. Oh, nice remark from Anne. The guru of a cult I was in was once reading about Muhammad, and I asked a question to which he replied angrily, "Are you questioning Muhammad?" That's exactly the point. So, first point is, how come a person who is meant to represent the divine become angry at simply receiving a question? And second, if they can't face a simple question, how can they consider that they have the truth at hand? Another way to see the general problem in which we are immersed has been shown by Carlos Castaneda, a remarkable author that was in touch with the Toltec culture in Mexico. Perhaps that was just an invention of his. Perhaps he really met a very deep shaman called Juan Matus. Regardless of which of the two is true, we had a great explanation of most of our problems through the sort of creatures that they called the flyer, or el volador in Spanish, a sort of shadow that lives attached to human beings and somehow harvests the energy which normally grows around us. We might interpret that energy as, who knows, maybe the astral body, maybe some other part of our complex inner anatomy. But let's say that these creatures feed off us and they put their mind inside of ours as a sort of unseen advisor. If you have seen The Lord of the Rings, you may remember there was a king that had an advisor next to his throne, which would always tell him what to say and what to do, and the king looked like he had almost petrified. Well, that's the idea of the flyer. By injecting ideas in our mind, which we consider as ours, he can push us in all the directions he wants. And normally those directions are those which take us into trouble, into drama, into explosions of feelings, which then are eaten with great pleasure by these entities. As you can see, there are many ways to describe the big trouble in which mankind is. Whether you assume one view or the other, there is a common denominator, there's a common factor, which is very important. That is, the way out is the same. So that's the lucky bit of it. Whether you consider yourself under the grip of a flyer or full of egos, or under a dystopian matrix which has programmed you into submission, you don't have to really choose. The way out is the same, and it is awakening your consciousness, because that's what will make you impervious to outer influences. And one of the main things that you have discovered in these weeks is that you have the right to reject thoughts and feelings that you see happening inside of you, because chances are those thoughts and feelings are not your own, especially if they lead you into trouble, into confrontation, into criticizing yourself, into feeling guilty. So these are some of the weapons that the enemy uses to extract something out of us, which Robert Monroe called the louche, but in other words is suffering from an emotional point of view. I see Eduardo knows very well Don Juan Matus. The book that I am talking about is called The Active Side of Infinity by Carlos Castaneda. It's quite a good read. All right. So in order to recap what the main obstacles are, I've classed them in two groups, just for your own convenience. And these will appear mostly when we decide to embark on a quest to discover the truth inside. So let's start from what happens internally. The main obstacles along the way will come from internal thoughts, which emerge strategically to discourage us, to make us feel that we are unable to achieve any progress, or to strongly appeal us towards a certain distraction, an old meaningless habit, or a hobby, or thoughts or feelings which are of a lower grade. You may also observe that if you try to pull through a practice, say meditation, your body may start to fight against you, making you feel some itch, making you feel some little stinging here and there. People around you may also act as agents of whatever we call it around us. Some say they are the agents of the matrix. Let's say that one is more likely to act against you as a seeker if this person is not conscious. So the more a person is, let's say, asleep, or to the extreme that it could be a soulless human, the more it's likely that this person can turn into Mr. Smith and somehow try to sabotage your efforts. How do people sabotage your efforts? It's not difficult. Distracting, creating some unpleasant situation for you, accusing you of something, regardless of whether that's really true or not, requiring your constant attention like vampires that are onto you all day. There are many ways, and after a while you will recognize where this is coming from. So you will have the chance to make a selection of the people you are with, your friends and your acquaintances, which of them somehow help you in your quest and hold on to them, and which ones are really creating some obstacles. I think there's a question from Carl. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, what if we have someone like that in the close range in the family? If you have people like this around you, friends, you can separate from them. But what if it is your wife? What if it is your son, your daughter? This is quite difficult to, you don't want to get rid of them, but yeah, it's for me, it's quite disturbing.
Thank you, Carl. It seems like in certain cases, we are not socially allowed, or let's say officially allowed, to separate from somebody. And I would say, let's look at the good side of this. That probably means there is a very important thing for you to learn, and you're not allowed to leave the classroom until you have learned. There is a reason why I say that. If you notice, not everybody is bothered in the same way by the same people. Something that for you is just intolerable in a person, for some others may seem like nothing. So the real trouble coming from somebody's behavior is not in the behavior itself, but is in the way you receive it. Or better said, by what part of you is there to receive it. So, for example, if you have a compulsive love for order, and your wife or your son tends to love disorder and make a mess every time that he can, if that attitude lands on your compulsive love for order, it will create a big friction inside of you every time. So you can say that this is God's punishment because I don't know why, but he's doing something very mean to me. Or you may look at what's happening inside of you every time and see, okay, so let's assume for a moment that I have to do something myself about this. We tend to put the shame and the guilt outside. That's the default attitude. But let's pretend just for a moment that maybe we do have a little bit of something to learn from this. And let's turn the look inside. So at that point, continuing with the example, I might notice that I have an excessive need for order, which comes from, continuing with hypothesis, I'm afraid to let go of myself. I'm afraid to jump into the unknown or to leave my little area of comfort, the comfort zone. So whenever I see a pen out of place on my desk, I have a little shiver because that reminds me that I don't feel at ease when I am out of my little box. So whenever my son is leaving his bedroom as a mess, I am assaulted by this. Now, if I start seeing that this is really a problem of mine, which gets simply triggered by an outside situation, then I have the opportunity to work on that and maybe expand my comfort zone, maybe start questioning why I need so much order around myself, which becomes a bit like a maniac thing. So this is just an example to let you see that as Carl Jung, the famous philosopher used to say, whatever we don't understand in ourselves, we project outside. And the things which really bother us in other people are our main unresolved problems. So try and make of this situation the bitter pill that will help your soul to move one step forward. And you might see that, like a miracle, like a charm, this person stops behaving in that way. All of a sudden, my son becomes more orderly. How is that happening? Well, maybe because I've made that lesson unnecessary, because I've passed the exam. So this is my optimistic way to see that, and I invite you to consider that seriously, because it might be true. If you discover that after doing all of your serious attempts at self-analysis and self-improvement, you still find that unbearable, then you have other options. But I would suggest that you try, because you might discover that then you change partner or you have another son, and that's exactly the same. Oh, how is that? So before we run into this over and over, let's have a serious attempt and looking at what is our part in this. Now, I've extended myself a bit on this, but I think it's such a general topic that it deserves a bit of an answer here. I see Eduardo said, different hell, same devil. Aha. Johan wrote, when they can't reach you to suck the lush out of you, they tend to target those closest to you, and they are possible to manipulate. Yes, that makes sense. So if you want to attack a fortress and you see that it has very strong walls, you will go around and around until you find a weak spot. And that is where you will attack. So out of the metaphor, the weak spot is that part of our personality which is underdeveloped, is that area where we are not ready to face the reality of the world as a grown-up human being. Something that maybe has remained like a bit childish inside of us, something that we were always told about, what we never wanted to recognize or face, some accusation that was always brought to us, but we never wanted to take seriously. So all of these things that we are, let's say, accused of, we should not dismiss lightly, because there's often a grain of truth in them. Okay, so we've mentioned what type of obstacles come in our way, starting from within. Now we've moved to the outside. We have talked about people outside of us, which somehow may be like conduit of attacks toward us. Let's also see what happens outside. So let's say that you have just got out of your mainstream religion because you finally found the courage to consider that maybe after all you're not going to hell just because you said no thank you. And then you will quickly be offered a smaller niche religion that will really accommodate for your needs, and they will say, oh, we're not like that. And you will meet a different type of religion. Then you discover there is still something wrong there and say goodbye to them as well. And then a very elitist cult will arrive. They will say, oh, you've got to the right place. We know what you need. You are a special person, etc., etc. Then you find it's another trap. Then you will find a smooth guru that really understands what is your weak spot or sweet spot, etc., etc. So a very big mesh network at the beginning you may go through, and then there is a smaller one you may also go through, and then there is an even smaller one. These are all structures that are meant to capture the sincere seeker and put him or her in a loop where she or he will go around thinking he's doing something great for humanity and he's developing himself. And actually, he's not doing anything but feeding a certain entity which is in charge of the local guru or local school. Then there is another way to block development of a whole planet. Because as we mentioned briefly in the past, we have three types of food. One is things we eat and drink. One is the air we breathe. And the third one is the impressions we get. Now, suppose I can find a way to poison all three. How's that? Well, I think you don't have to search too much to find out that there are good reasons to believe that our air is not so fresh as it should be, thanks to the generous spraying of substances, either willingly or unwillingly, that our food is often industrially processed, is genetically modified, and we've been given very wrong traditional habits of dieting, which may lead us to develop a lot of illnesses. If we just follow the mainstream and we eat like our fathers did, it's pretty normal that by the time we are 50, we have had either a stroke or a heart attack or a cancer or something else. It's just a consequence of the bad eating habits we have inherited and which are heavily promoted by advertising. By the way, any of you thinks advertising is for your own good? Raise your hand if you do. Please don't. Okay, you got the point. So the third one is, after air and food, impressions. How do I poison the impressions of a whole planet? Mass media can do that easily, and they do all the time. By showing violence, by showing lack of human feelings in people, by selecting carefully the saddest and horrible news and leaving out the good ones, by scaring you, by presenting always the dark and scary side of an event. There's a nice pun here. It's not advertising, it's badvertising. That's nice, Johan. So, it's difficult to escape all of these. That is traps and poisoning and an original programming. So no wonder we are constantly out of balance, constantly fatigued, often ill, forced to work like slaves, to buy things we don't need to impress people we don't like. That's a good one. I don't know who said that, but I thought it was pretty funny. And then we spend the little time and energy left in the attempt to put a remedy to our endless artificially induced problems and illnesses. So what energy and time are left for a spiritual quest? Hardly any. That's why it's so difficult to find the resolve and the force to start such a quest, because normally all of our energy is drawn by all of these issues. And Sandra is adding, we are being desensitized. Well, yes, mass media are making us accustomed to seeing violence and death since childhood. Have you ever wondered why there is a lot of censorship on, for example, love scenes in movies, and there is hardly any censorship on killing and violence? It is as if it was a lot more dangerous to make love than to kill somebody. There's something wrong with that. Well, no wonder. You know, sex is one of the areas where our strongest energies reside. And controlling your use of sex and your thoughts about sex is one of the main ways that, let's say, the powers that be use to keep us in check. With guilt, with a sense of shame and sin. So we are basically forced into silence, and even just mentioning the word sex gives us a shiver. Ooh, what will they think about me? I'm talking about this forbidden topic. So I remember that there was a famous guru in our history that once was deeply offended when watching a movie. It was called Dance with the Wolves. And at the beginning of this movie, there's the main character, played by Kevin Costner, if I remember well, was in the middle of a war. And there was killings everywhere, hundreds of people dying all over the place. And this guru watched the movie and it was perfectly okay. Then there's a scene where you can see Kevin Costner coming out of a pond and he was naked. Now that's too much. That's sinful. That's horrible. Now this is the attitude that we found. That is, violence and death are okay, but seeing somebody the way his mother made him, so to speak, is a horrible sin. So the proper use of sexual energies is quite a big topic. And all I can say today, because we are already beyond time, is that there are ways to use sexual energy which are far beyond what we normally know. And in order to prevent that from happening, there are huge structures, especially mainstream religions, and a sort of censorship in the culture, which tend to separate us from sex, to make it feel like something dirty and loaded of guilt. So we don't even touch the argument, the topic at all. By the way, there is a big effort by the powers that be in order to move our young people into a very bad relationship with sex as well, in order to make them think that this is something to be commercialized, to be given no consideration for true feelings. It is all turned into shallow relationships and pornography, etc., which makes children lose even the possibility of a right approach to a healthy sexual life, let alone with a transcended sexual life. So as you see, there is no shortage of problems around us, not only for sincere seekers, but also as like a preventative barrier to block young men and young women before they even think about a spiritual quest, just to cripple them up front when they are children by creating in them a lot of obstacles, problems, and artificial ideas. Despite all of this, I'd like to say that if from every experience, every obstacles we encounter, we take the bad part away and we keep the good part, we don't throw away the baby with the bathwater, there is always something to be learned. And for some reason, nowadays, there is a lot more stimuli and information that allow the sincere seeker to find answers and advice and encouragement. So by the same amount that the outside situation seems oppressive and desperate, the possibilities inside seem to also increase. It looks like there's a a big game of chess going on. It's just that the black pieces are moved a lot more actively and the white ones are moved by a hand which comes from higher up. But when that moves, it makes a lot of difference and gives us a big help. If I was an alien trying to keep someone away from a certain truth or a certain teaching, say for example, self-remembering, what would I do? Well, I wouldn't probably hide it, but I would put it perhaps a bit devitalized, a bit wrong, in the middle of a cult in which I draw this person. So if this person remains in the cult forever, then that's fine because I've given him the wrong version. But if this person goes out, then when rejecting the cult, this person will probably reject the teaching as well because it's part of something which is baited in a very dark light. So it's very unlikely that this person will go and take away all the mud and all the dirt and take the pearl from that and polish it and say there was a treasure hidden inside and I still want it, even though it was in the middle of all of this dirt. So don't be tempted to throw away as a whole your bad experiences. They may contain a treasure for you to find. And it may be painful, it may be difficult to go and dig in the middle of those bad experiences because they carry a heavy load of feelings and of thoughts which tend to draw you back down. But if you have even just the suspicion that there may be something hidden that is good for you, listen to this inner voice, because it may actually be a strategy to keep you away from something that is good for you. So Anne is correctly pointing out that they simultaneously repress and overstimulate our sexuality. Says, my niece was sexting and she was 12. My brother was stunned. No comment. Daniel said, yes, that's so real. And Sandra says, they are getting a lot of confusion also with the whole gender topic. Absolutely. Great remark. There is a whole huge pressure into making us consider that it's absolutely fine to twist our ordinary sexual orientation into something which is drawn into directions which are unnatural and against our own will, maybe based on a fashionable character or influencers or the mass media, or just because people think it's cool. And once you accept that, you will then feed something which was not part of your nature or was part of a programming that was just inserted to twist you away from your development. So if this was a newscast on CNN, that would be a deluge of horrible criticism on that. And newspapers would say, Alberto gets blasted after talking about sexual gender orientation, etc., etc. And that looks like a news. Just because a lot of people send you a nasty remark on Twitter, that makes it to the front page, forgetting that since people have been programmed en masse, it's obvious that whatever goes against the control system gets a very strong backlash. But from whom? I think you know the answer. Johnny is adding here, transmuting our personal history. Shiva and Shakti are essentially one and the same. So destroying and recreating, finding the good part in a mass which is decomposing. Something which is decomposing will then feed a plant which will then bring life back up towards the sky. So it is a fair remark that we should always be looking for the good, even in experiences which felt bad originally. Probably they have happened for a reason. It is a good attitude to look for the good in the bad, so to speak. It helps us to keep the faith in an overall good outcome for our own spirit. So if you were Neo, we could probably plug something in your head and do a bit of jiu-jitsu training. Let's remember then what are our main weapons here. So the origins of your thoughts and feelings, as we said, may be part of your flyer or, let's say, foreign installation in your head. So remember, you have the full right to disavow them and not use them. And each time you have enough presence to notice an invader, of course, take advantage of that. Enjoy a moment of presence. Make it last as long as you can. That is the real part of your day. So make it last as long as you can. When you get a resolve to escape from the prison, the good part of you is making a big effort, which wakes up the say, dark parts of you. So a war starts at that point. But if you had that call, that means you can win. So be confident in your forces and don't believe your feelings and thoughts that tell you otherwise, because they might not be yours. Generally speaking, they will not be yours. Whenever something comes into your head which has the tone of a sentence being told, that's normally the ego content type. Like something spelled out in your mind. If it comes from your essence, it is instantaneous. It's like immediate. It's there and that's it. The ego is slower. So that is one way to try and distinguish. But generally speaking, the proof is in the, let's say, is in the eating. So is if you feel something coming that you had not summoned, you had not decided to have, red flag, probably not yours. Oh, I have a quotation here. Says, remembering the phrase, everything happens for a reason, in the Hang the DJ episode of the great Black Mirror series. Unfortunately, haven't watched that, but maybe some of you have, so you may pick this up from Eduardo. Thank you. Don Juan from Castaneda also considered it a fortunate thing to come into contact with the petty tyrant, which is the inner enemy, so to speak. Well, if you come into contact with that, possibly that means you're ready for the quest. So that may be your call to arms, so to speak. So I agree. Andrea was asking if I can make an example about that. An example about a thought which comes as an obstacle to our inner work. Well, one could be, I want to read a piece of a book from Mr. Gurdjieff. And the second thought comes and says, oh, I had that newspaper I bought yesterday. I still haven't read that. So I'm drawn away, and then I may forget what I was going to do. Or I will try a practice about self-remembering or meditation, and I feel a bit sleepy. All of a sudden, I feel a bit drowsy. And say, well, maybe I'll do that later, and then I forget. So whatever comes straight as an obstacle into an intention to do something towards the work, that is clearly an interference and is a sort of inner enemy acting. There will be other cases where this is not as a result of a direct attempt from our part, but maybe a way to discourage us. For example, after reading or doing something practical like trying to remember ourselves, we realize that we forgot about ourselves for a whole day and we spend the whole day in autopilot. And there comes a thought that says, oh, you're so useless. You will never make it. Now that is the ego trying to discourage you. Don't believe it. That is just one more thought to be discarded. So after a while, you recognize the attitude. So let's see where we are. It's a bit late. I'm aware of that. And I think we might now open for questions. And then at the end, I'd like to give you a bit of a message. So maybe if you want to just unmute your microphone, ask questions or raise your hand, however you like. Make sure your camera is on if you raise your hand. Yes, yes, Carl, go ahead. Carl, can you unmute yourself?
I hit the wrong button.
Oh, okay. That was an ego, don't worry.
Okay. It's related to the last session. That's when you told that somebody can lose his soul when he kills someone. But aren't there more ways to lose oneself or the core in oneself than just to kill someone?
Mm-hmm. I have a strong clue that this is possible if you constantly ignore and obliterate the impulses which come from your soul. So let's say that with responsibility, with consciousness comes responsibility in the same proportion. So if you haven't got a clue and you never even have an idea of what is presence, then of course you are more forgivable for not following a good impulse. But if you feel a good impulse and you decide to ignore it, and you do that over and over, I suspect that at some point your spirit or your soul may just disengage and say, well, there's something wrong with this guy here. And you may become a different person from the point of view of others. What you feel inside, I don't dare to tell you, but I would imagine that there's something pretty unpleasant. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. I don't have the Tibetan mindful bell, but I have a different one today. That's just to remember ourselves from time to time. Okay. Have I missed any hands here? No. Oh yes, Andrea, please go ahead.
When we have the impression that we didn't accomplish our targets or the task that we thought we want to do every day, and it seems from our point of view that it isn't enough, is really small, our target that we accomplished. Is that always our ego that is talking to us?
Okay, good point. I would say that a reminder about you had to do this and you did that is useful. Now, if that comes as a broken record that keeps telling me, then that's the ego kicking in. So let's say that as long as it's useful information, maybe once, maybe twice, I can believe it can be a useful thing. You're sort of reminding yourself, whoops, my duty was a bit more than that. But when it becomes compulsive, when it becomes heavy, then it's the ego trying to take advantage of your difficulty and trying to make you feel bad. If you need to leave, like Eduardo, no problem. I know it's a bit late. And Daniel, sorry, and yes, Daniel as well.
I was just saying bye to Daniel. I'm still here.
Okay, okay. There's a private question. I think it is worth mentioning. Is there such a thing as evil? I'd like to make here a distinction. So there is errors or mistakes we make in the course of, let's say, a sincere life under so many oppressive limitations. So we may actually hurt somebody without willing or as a result of a negligence. There may be, and I'm pretty sure that there is, also cases when there's an entity or a creature that deliberately chooses to inflict pain in order to get some result. That is the case when I would use the word evil, because that's his intention. It's not a mistake. Hopefully, that's not something which is important within us. I mean, the people who are here with us. We would never probably do something intentionally to create pain. But if it happens, we might feel remorse, and we might want to make up for that, and beg for forgiveness, and analyze ourselves why we did that. Completely different thing is an entity which creates pain, then it's just happy and creates more. So this type of entity may really lack a piece of being which we might call consciousness. So I'm afraid it does exist. I hope it doesn't exist within any of us, because that is a sign that we're on a very different course from what the source is asking of us. It is to develop consciousness, which is inherently towards unity. And when you feel a feeling of unity with everyone, of course, evil is not part of your vocabulary. So this has been going on for a bit longer than usual, but I'm confident this has been useful. Let me just mention briefly that next week we will have our last webinar of this series. As I mentioned, we would like to continue in a different format in the following weeks for those who are willing. There will not be so much lecturing, but rather there will be a little topic, mostly about psychology under the point of view of the fourth way, and then a bit of a discussion. This while striving to keep our presence. So it will be a bit more practical and less theoretical. So you're welcome to join and continue. We will try to continue to publish them on the YouTube channel, of course, but you will recognize that it can do a lot more for you if you are there while it happens, because this gives you a chance to experience it from your real self. Well, you can do that also on a recording. You will taste the difference at some point and understand what I'm talking about. The other thing is there is a project that Daniela and I are now working on, that means the creation in the next future of a center, a physical place where we will have a sort of school of development for the harmonious development of man. And that means a place where we can have lectures, we can have seminars, we can have retreats. This is a place where we would probably live at a certain point. At the beginning, it may be just a place where we spend some time, depending on work commitments and our ability to live and set up some work activity there. I say there because it is not easy to do where we are currently living, because in England, getting a piece of land and building something on that is very difficult. There are other places where this is less difficult. So what I want to say here is you may find that this resonates with you, and in the future you may want to somehow be part of this or contribute to this in some way. So keep this, I was going to say in your mind, well, I'll say in your consciousness, as something that you may want to consider. And we will let you know more if you are interested. And later on, we will have a chance to speak more about this as the initiative takes shape. We also have a suggestion for the name of the center. We will later see what we want to do. Thank you, Eduardo. Okay. Oh, we have a remark here. It's a private one, but it's a thank you. And I understand that this friend of ours says he or she is getting stronger. I'm happy to read that. Hopefully, this is something that will be true for all of us. And be assured that just as you are getting hopefully some help out of this, so are we. This is something that is not just one way, it helps in both directions. So the original name of this initiative, just to share it with you, is the School for the Harmonic Development of the Human Being. And this is an idea that was also originally entertained by Gurdjieff, and that was a long time ago. We may want to do something in that same direction, maybe with the help of some of you, maybe with a contribution or just a personal goodwill to make this work. All right. This is all from our side. Thank you very much for being here with us. I hope we will see you next Saturday for the final lecture of this series, which we can call the basics, the fundamentals, or ABC, so to speak. And for those who want, then we will do a little more practical work on psychology from the fourth way.
Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Have a great weekend and a conscious week. As always, we are here if you want to write or have a chat. So for now, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good weekend.
Hey, hasta la vista. Auf Wiedersehen.
Bye. Adios.
Bye. Glad I could make it again.
Bye-bye.
Takes a while to check out here sometimes. Have to find everything. Thanks. Very practical. Thank you.
Ciao, Johnny.